Thank you, Lucas. Yeah, my name is Jeff Charbonneau. I'm a senior technical specialist here at Autodesk. I've been working in production for about 23 years. I started my career in video games for about half of my career and then transitioned into animated series in Toronto. I've held different roles. I've been a technical artist, an asset artist, a CG Soup, director of production technology, and then VP of technology. I like technologies. I like to see what's possible as these new things are emerging. And I like to play with the latest cool toys. And this is very much one of those things. So today I will start, of course, with the safe harbor statement, just to say that, any forward-looking statements that are made during this presentation are not intended to be promises or guarantees of future availability in product, services, or features, and to please don't make any purchasing decisions based solely on these. So that's for the legal talk. But let's take a look at the agenda. We're going to spend a little bit of time on the fundamentals of what is MotionMaker. I want to take a very deep look into how you can implement things in a pipeline, but we'll start easy with some of the basics and then transition into some of the applications in game cinematic workflows. And also at the top, I just want to mention that because this is about AI, bringing AI into your creative tools, there's a real focus at Autodesk to create AI tools that are for artists that can solve real problems in production and to give artists new ways to create. And we want to be transparent in the way that we build these tools. So if you go to our website, to the Trust Center, you'll have a kind of a small menu of elements that we share systematically with these AI solutions. So at a glance, you can tell what are the technology used in this. What is the data source for the tool? Any kind of privacy or security issues are made clear. And for MotionMaker, because it uses mocap or motion capture data, we want to be clear and upfront about the fact that all of that data was purchased with the full rights so that you can use this tool without any concerns about where this data came from. It's data that was purchased for the purpose of building this tool. On the Trust Center, you'll see some of the foundational elements about responsible development, where we want to adhere to the highest standards in the way we acquire and manage the data and training and how it's being delivered in a fair and safe AI model. Also transparent, like you can see here in the transparency cards, but also our accountability in terms of respecting consumer choices and make sure that they align with laws and regulation. You'll see also that we want the tools to be reliable. They're built in a rigorous way, but also that they are safe and secure, and that we are committed to protecting data, intellectual property, and privacy. So that's a mouthful, but it's really important in your production. I hear it every day from studios that there's always questions from your clients. Where's this data coming from? Can we use this? With MotionMaker, we've made it as straightforward as possible. So what is MotionMaker? At the highest level, it is an assistant that will help you generate animation on characters. It's really about locomotion and specific kinds of motions. It can be useful when you're tackling that kind of a movement of a character from point A to point B that could take a whole lot of time to do all the foot contacts and everything that's involved in the very involved task of animating a character going from point A to point B. Can it be most useful for? Some of the things we're going to explore today is for cinematic artists. So those pre-animated sequences, the kind of like emotionally charged moments of your game where you have a character, uh, going through a very specific moment. It can be useful there. It can be useful for technical artists, for crowd animators, and for animators in general. So we'll dive deeper into some of those use cases in a minute. But before going too far, I just want to show you what that looks like in the interface. So here, this is one of the models that's available, and there's currently in Maya 2026, there's two. There's a biped and a quadruped, and what we're seeing here is the quadruped that's walking. I've created a path. The character then tries to follow that path with all the constraints, and then MotionMaker will generate the keyframes for that motion. So it can really reduce the time spent manually keyframing, and can enable higher quality animation, especially in those early kind of discovery phases when you're building up exactly what you want to do. And all of this happening within Maya, an animation tool that you probably know and that you are used to, this ecosystem of tools. And MotionMaker is tightly integrated in Maya. So here, what you're seeing is that same MotionMaker generated keyframe animation for this canine, but then I'm using the animation layers to add a performance on top of it. So MotionMaker creates the locomotion, but then I want to animate the head of the dog, for example, to look at the camera. And I can do that by applying just an anim layer offset on top. It's non-destructive, it's super easy to do, and it's the kind of workflows that you can start to look into as the underlying locomotion has been put in place by MotionMaker, and now you're kind of starting to direct the actual performance of the character. I want to emphasize the power of that integration within Maya. In this example here, what you're seeing at the top is a MotionMaker generated motion on the canine. So that's happening on a plane. But then when you mix that with Human IK, you can also start to use some of its features, also integrated in Maya, with effectors to really pin down exactly where the paws are hitting and making sure that they are constrained in space and that they're not slipping. But then here, the artist is also using Bifrost to drive the character to match the terrain, the underlying terrain, using a raycast functionality. So you can see how all of these bits within Maya are playing together to really accelerate your animation process, and you can start to build a custom solution, even for following terrains. With the same sort of idea, within Maya, you can also use the Unreal Engine Live Link, and here on the screen, you can see on the left that we have Maya with a number of these MotionMaker characters that are animated. And I'm in real time updating the path of one of these characters. On the right, you have Unreal Engine with Live Link connected to it. So I'm streaming the keyframes from Maya into Unreal Engine, where I can see the updates live. So I can have Maya as my playground where I'm, interactively changing. I can have a team of people kind of looking at the scene and saying, "Hey, what if we do this?" or "What if we do that?" You kind of get into that playful state, but also at the same time see the result over in Unreal, where you can freely move the camera, for example, and start to think about, the cinematography of your shot. And we'll take a deeper look at this sort of connectivity throughout this webinar. But I want to go back into the basics, into the very first steps in getting to know MotionMaker. So here, going back to Maya uh, and its integration, you'll see that once you've loaded MotionMaker, you can bring up the MotionMaker editor window at the bottom, which is a window that should be very, very familiar to animators. And from that window, you can spawn in characters. So here in this example, I will bring in the canine model. There's features so that you can decide if you want to import it or reference it. If you have a whole lot of characters, it might be benefit to referencing it so that you're not paying the tax for every character that you're adding. And there's other features too in terms of using low kind of proxy versions or higher versions so that your viewport stays nice and interactive. Here, I'll create a keyframe with a locator. So when you spawn in your MotionMaker character, you have this locator that comes up, and then you can put keyframes on that locator, and that becomes the direction you're giving to the locomotion of this canine. So here in the timeline at the bottom, you'll see that orange bar. That's the amount of time or the selected portion of the timeline where you want to generate keys. And maybe I can spend a little bit of time on this. It is generating actual keyframes on the skeleton. So these are keyframes that are available in your graph editor, in your dope sheet. You can take them, you can distort them, you can scale them. It's real data, it's not a black box. So it should be very familiar to animators. And you decide how much of the performance you want to have generated as you hit that generate button. So it can be here, at first it was 50 frames, but then you can increase it to 100 frames or whatever length your performance is. Once you have a character with a direction, you say, I want to start here, I want to end there, then you can start to use other tools like a trail, the trail visualizer. So you can visualize the trail of that locator. You can see where the character is going to go and then start updating the position in time and in space. And that's where you kind of can start to think about it as a director and say, well, actually, I want to give a cue for the canine to move over here at this time. And with the motion trail visualizer, you can see that keyframe. It's in your viewport, and you can start to edit that performance and the path that the character takes. So that's some of the very basic ways that you can interact through MotionMaker. But next, we're going to take a look at sort of an example of how you can use this tool as you're building up a cinematic workflow, for example. And I'll use the a specific example that I'm building for this case, where you've received a brief that says there'll be a wild chase in the streets of a futuristic town, and your hero is being chased. But good news, there's an ally in this environment. And I'm going to use this example to show a few things. I'm going to walk through just that setup, fundamental setup of that environment that we're going to play in. We're then going to look at specific performances within that space. We're going to look at timing and how we can use that motion path to become very specific about what we want to get in terms of that performance. We're going to explore various paths for our hero because you can start to do cool things by switching between different anim layers, for example. We're going to set up an optional Unreal Live Link so that you can see in parallel what's happening in Maya to what's happening in Unreal Engine, for example. And then we'll adapt the chase based on various options, and we'll set up a jump action and then we'll add multiple agents. All of this to kind of show some of the powerful things that you can do with MotionMaker. And just to give you an example of what I'm going for, so I have my hero, she's running, and there's more characters running after her. There's even a dog in the mix, but at the very end here, we're seeing a glimpse of her ally that's there, and that, of course, is going to be our opportunity for the emotions and the performance. But let's take a look. And here I've just, in the end, exported everything to Unreal Engine. So all of this data that I'm generating, I can keep in sync using LiveLink, but obviously I can also export the whole thing using the game exporter or FBX exporter, depending on your workflows. But all of it lands and is usable on the game side as you're building up your specific sequence. So I'm going to take just a moment here, and we're going to set up the environment that we're going to play in. So here I have a number of buildings that are going to give me the various paths that my hero can take as she's running in this environment. I'll have the same environment, just kind of a kind of proxy setup on the Unreal side, so that I have, the same thing happening in Maya that I have in Unreal, so that I have parity between my two environments. And then we'll get into specific performances within this space. And this space will give us an opportunity to discover new ideas and explore and play a little bit with our characters in this essentially new way of working. So very first thing I'm going to do is open up the MotionMaker editor, and I will spawn in my very first character, the biped, which in this case is going to be the female template. And I give it a namespace, and then I hit create, and our character comes in. So here we have the character spawned in at the origin at 0 and ready to begin the performance. I'm going to put a keyframe here just because I want to have a frame of reference for the whole cinematic, which is going to be at 0, just as I'm moving back and forth between Maya and Unreal. I don't want to have any translates or anything weird, so I'm anchoring it at the origin. And then I've decided that I want the characters to start from 2 building down on the left. So I'll just create a bit of a pre-roll into minus frames for the character to actually walk over there and get ready for the performance. And of course, you can cut all of this out by the time you're exporting at the end. But here I'm just moving my character into the distance and setting up the starting position at 0. So my character is actually going to run over there and get ready for further instructions. So then moving forward in time a little bit, I know that I want the character to walk over and come around the corner. So I'll put a keyframe there, and then set up the keyframe as the character comes down the alleyway towards the camera. So I'm putting more keyframes here and orienting where the character is facing as I'm moving down this road. And then I know that I want the character to kind of slide by near where my camera is. So I'll put a few keyframes there with finally the character running in front of the restaurant building as she exits to the left. Now that I've set up those keyframes, I've hit the generate button. So that's happening right now. It takes a few seconds. And now I have locomotion keyframes that have been generated on the character. So the character is now running down the road and is now running in front of the restaurant. So I can jump into my my cinematic camera, for example, and take a look at what I have. So to get this performance, which is currently running down the road, I set up essentially 5 keyframes, keyframing the various positions of where I want the character and when I want them. What's important here is that I'm in control. I've decided that I want the character to start right there at that position. I've decided that I want the character to run and come down and then come across the camera. I have frame accuracy of what I want to see. So I'm directing it, and there's a clear relationship between my intent and what the character is doing. Once I have that, if I want to have even more control, then like I did before, I'll bring in some motion trails to just kind of visualize exactly where the character is, when they're in a different position, to make sure that, I know exactly at what frame the character is. And that becomes important as I'm orchestrating and directing multiple characters running in my 3D space. So I can see all of that, and I have keyframes and very specific positions. So that's what we're seeing here. And then I'm going to move into the next phase, which is that once I have my character and I have a first path that the character can run through, I can start to play with different options. I don't have to just do, okay, I've got my 5 keyframes, the character is coming from the left. I can also explore other ideas. I can say, well, what if the character was actually running down, straight down from the camera towards the camera? So here I'll use the anim layers to create an alternative path that I can switch between path A, for example, and path B. And then because it only takes a few seconds to generate those keyframes, I can very easily set up that alternative path, and then regenerate and explore different ways of traveling through the space. And this is really where, the creator can kick in and start to explore and discover happy accidents, and maybe come up with something that is clearer in a 3D space as you're playing with the camera and the relationship with the characters, than something that maybe you couldn't plan otherwise. So you're actually playing. So here I've completed that second path. I can switch between my 2 paths, hit generate, and then my character will meet those constraints. And here you'll see that I've regenerated a new path, and my character, here I'm actually hitting the generate, and the character is going to snap over there and now run towards the camera. So just a few more clicks, and I'm now exploring the 3D space. So I have my character running down. So you can iterate and play with it, which is what we're seeing here. And you can snap between the two and explore that space. Now let's take a look at the technology that I'm using to keep both Maya and optionally, for example, Unreal Engine in sync. So you have the Unreal Live Link for Maya. You can get that from the App Store. It's an open source project, so you have access to the full source code. You can download it. You can compile it, and that's a technology that allows you to keep the sessions between Maya and Unreal in sync. And here I'm walking through that plugin setup. You would install it on the computer. There's different installs for Windows and Linux, and then you can run it within Maya, which will give you a new menu where you can start to define which character you want to keep in sync across 2 sessions. So here on the Maya side, I'm going to select my MotionMaker character, and I'm going to add it to my live link session. And now that my plugin is loaded, on the Unreal side, Same thing. I have now my Live Link plugin loaded, and I will find the Maya broadcast, the instance that's actually sending over that keyframe information. And now that I have a connection between Maya and Unreal Engine, it is keeping the two in sync. And there's one more thing. Well, here, let's take a look at some of the things that you can see once you're in sync. Is you can start to direct the character uh, from your Maya session and see it reflected immediately on the Unreal side. So here my character is running down, and I've decided that I want to jump. And it's one of the actions that's available. So here we're going to get the character to jump in the motion, the in the yeah at the bottom in the timeline. You can decide exactly where you want to have that jump. You're controlling it like you would in a NLE application. You can say exactly where you want the action to happen, and then you regenerate. And here you'll see the streaming in of the latest simulation of those keyframes as the two applications now are in sync, and the character is jumping in both. So this is all interactive, and you can play with that. Um, One of the more technical aspects of getting the system to work is that you want to have a blueprint, for example, on the Unreal Engine side. All of this is optional, of course, but if you are developing with Unreal, you can set up a blueprint for your character to actually connect your character from Maya to the right character on the Unreal Engine side. And I just want to spend a little bit of time showing how you do that. So the first step, of course, of getting any character over into your game engine is to export it. So here I've taken the MotionMaker character and I'm using the Maya feature of send to Unreal to actually export that character structure. And it's important how you select that top group, the hierarchy. You want that hierarchy to be consistent on two sides. And as you're connecting things together, you want that to be consistent. So if you have a top group, you want to select that top group and export the character. And then when you bring in that character in your game engine, in this example here in Unreal, then you'll have consistency between the two. So now I have the MotionMaker character importing into Unreal. And using the anim blueprint, I will connect the specific skeleton into this anim blueprint. And I will be using that blueprint to populate my world. And then you have the option of creating a live link pose node that you connect into your character, into your blueprint. And this is where you can do that connection between the character that you have in Maya that's streaming out. And here I'm creating that connection between Unreal and Maya. So here on the Maya side, spinning up my live link, I'm defining consistently that I'm exporting the data from this MotionMaker character. I can see it on the Unreal side, and then I can select that MotionMaker character as my input flowing into that blueprint. Once you have that blueprint, you can drop it into your environment, and then from there, really start to build up what you're going to do. You'll see that the camera data is also flowing, and you can start to get your things working together. Here, I'll create a few keyframes between the MotionMaker character, so that I'm creating some of that keyframe data, just generating it now. And you'll see on the Maya side, my character is going to start to move, and we'll take a look at how you can set up that on the Unreal side. So there's a little trick. Because this is not in a sequence, you actually want to toggle on the animate in editor feature that keeps the two things in sync. And once you've done this, and that's maybe the most technical aspect of setting this environment or this setup up, once you have that, then your characters will be in sync. So just from a kind of time investment perspective, think of all the times you're exporting FPXs from Maya into Unreal, and when you're iterating quickly through different scenarios, how many times you could do that in a day. Well, if you have this live link between the two and you're just interactively doing it, you're skipping that export step every time, and you can spend more time actually animating and seeing the result in your game engine. So, it's a little bit of a setup, but once you have it up and running, then it's magic. And let's take a look at some of those examples of what that looks like. I've been working with the human character so far, but the live link will connect, and you can broadcast bone information through different characters. So here I'm doing the same thing with the canine character. So you can, whatever character you have, you can do the mapping to the bones. And the other thing that is useful that I just wanted to highlight in this webinar is that once you have your motion with MotionMaker, you can then connect using HIK or Human IK and do the mapping between the MotionMaker motion and your custom character. And that's what I'm doing here. I'm using HIK to map my specific hero character and now MotionMaker is driving the animation, but my hero character is actually doing the running around in my 3D space. So I'm building up my components to get to my scene. So now I'm seeing my specific hero character. So now that I have my hero character in my 3D scene running around, I can start to build up some of the complexity. Of course, here I have a very contrived obstacle to jump over, a sort of vacuum droid thing that's going in the environment, but I have the ability to cue that jump exactly where I want. It's to show just how much control you have over the timing of what's happening. You're not rolling the dice. You are in control of what's happening. So now I have a second character and a path that's running through. Now let's take a look at, let's have 5 characters running around. So I have my hero running with the mapping. I have my second MotionMaker. This one is a male model that's running right behind. And then I want to start to build up the animation with more crowd characters running around. So I've added one on the right. Now I'm going to add one on the left with, very tight constraints on exactly who's walking where, and I don't want to have any intersections, so I can control the timing of each one of these things over time. And with my path and my controls that I have in my editor, I can do all of that. So that brings me here where I have now sequenced all of these things in MotionMaker. All of this is very locomotion centric, where I've very quickly put together a whole lot of motion. My characters are running around, no one's crashing into anyone, but now I can start to think about the performance. So the kind of the legwork, literally the legwork of running around was taken care of, and now it's time to start to animate. And I have my extra character there in the restaurant who will be, of course, my target for that. This is just to show all of the very intricate relationships that we have between the various characters. So maybe just to circle back, um, what you can see is possible with MotionMaker is that when I have locomotion and running actions using this tool, I can play within an environment. I can try different scenarios. I can play with the timing, and I can iterate very quickly on my environment. I'm not just implementing one version of this and spending all of my time kind of trying to pull off the one version, but I have a tool set that lets me iterate and play in time and space. It gives me a starting point for planning all of these motions across several characters. You can use it as such. You can use it as a planning tool, but then you can layer on the performance using non-destructive workflows like the anim layers. Um, and then you can make real-time decisions about where the camera should be and react and find new opportunities that may not have been obvious otherwise. And it opens up time for animating the performance, the thing that is most important, the emotion that will then connect with your audience. All of this with actual keyframes in layers. It's not a black box. So you can define and redefine the motion. So that's a very quick look at some of the workflows that are possible at the intersection of MotionMaker and game cinematic workflows.
So now we do have time for Q&A. So basically, if you guys have any questions, please drop them in the chat box or the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll make sure to get to all of those. So first, before kicking off, and I'll let some questions flow through, I did want to ask both of you. So when MotionMaker generates that first pass, what typically, in your opinion, still requires the most animator attention afterwards? And I know, JF, you probably covered a lot of that in your section, so maybe do you want to take that question first?
Yeah, sure. Well, yeah, MotionMaker tackles the locomotion out of the box for your biped and your canine. So it's giving you all that keyframe, but that's not a performance yet. That is the movement from point A to point B. It's the mechanics of the action. So then it's about layering the performance on top, and you can do it. And I mentioned it in my presentation. You can use non-destructive anim layers on top of it, and use other systems to enhance the interaction. But that's really where you can jump in and become prescriptive about the performance that you want and keyframe the very specific emotions and communication and all of the things that make for great animation. That's your cue to jump in and really make it into your sequence, your performance.
Great, thank you, JF. I do also have a question from the audience. This is from Ida. When linking between Maya and an engine, do you have to have world orientation and FPS to match between the two? Like imagine the situation where Maya work is in 30 FPS, Y up, but engine in 60 FPS and Z up.
Yes. So you have options to do all of that mapping. You have options in Maya when you're exporting things. You have options in Unreal Engine when you're receiving those things. In the import stage of the character, I set up, the axis and made sure that everything was matching. When I'm streaming in these examples, I'm streaming at 30 FPS. I set up my environment on the Maya side to be specific to that, but you can set it up to be 60 and getting it to match because it is important, yes, to have alignment in space and time for sure. Yes.
Nice, thank you. Great answer. I do have another question coming in from Evgeny. So how actions are stored? What determines the transition between actions? Does the user have control over blending animation?
Yeah, I can take just a take on this. So when I'm creating those keyframes, I'm creating the constraints of where I want the character to be. And then based on what is the path, so if the character is turning, if the character has to travel a lot of distance in a short amount of time, then MotionMaker will generate the keyframes to meet those constraints. So your artistic direction is with those constraints where you can say, I want it to be here at this time, and then you have things like attention. There's an arrow on the character that you can control where the character's attention is. And out of all of those constraints, MotionMaker will generate the transitions that are super naturalistic. So it actually solves a lot of that problem. So the control is at the tool level, the timing, the position, and then the solution comes from MotionMaker.
Yeah, if I may add to that,
Yeah.
part of the question was where are the actions stored, I believe. The actions are part of the model. So yes, there's locomotion. There's also actions like jump or sit and so forth. And those are part of the trained model. And what we're doing with the bring your own data system is that you could add your own actions of, whatever you need the model to do. And the other part of your question was about blending that. So as JF described, so the model has learned the behavior. It's not clip blending. It's not state machine. It's not those traditional types of workflows. This is learned behavior. And so it knows the most natural form of motion to get from one action to the next action. And that'll be very natural. You don't have to do much there and do anything there. Um, the other part of the question that's implied is, what if I've hand animated something, a particular action that's not in the the model, the trained model, and then I want to blend from that action into MotionMaker actions. Um, that is a more of a manual process today to get from your custom animation to that. Of course, you can layer performance on top of it and use layers in that way. But that's something that we're looking at so that we could blend from arbitrary motion states that are not in the trained machine learning model to things that are in the the machine learned training model. So.
Great, thank you both. I have another question here from Stephanie. Can MotionMaker also generate movements such as sitting down, standing up, or moving arms in a certain way?
Yeah, I'll just continue talking to that.
Yeah.
Yes, as I described, you can have all of those actions. If they're in the training set, uh, then you can key them as part of the interface. So all of that is possible. There was a part of the question was about swinging the arms very specifically. You'll get what the trained behavior is in the model. So if you use the natural human motion that comes with Maya today, you'll get arm swinging in the natural way. If you want a very art-directed type of swinging, then you'd have to use an animation layer, and you can hand animate on top of that. In the future, you'll be able to just train a custom model. So if you wanted excited arm swinging or lazy arm swinging, and you have a motion capture set or an animation set to train with, then you'll have that as a keyable option.
Sounds good, thanks. And JF, I actually have a question for you from Evgeny that might apply since you covered more of this in your part of the presentation. So how does MotionMaker solve obstacles, like collisions, for example, a character running up the stairs or climbing something, jumping between two objects?
So in some of the examples that I showed, one specifically, there's a dog that was walking on the terrain. So MotionMaker isn't actively reacting to the terrain. MotionMaker is just generating the keyframes of that motion. And then in that example, the artist was using other systems like human IK constraints and effectors to actually pin down the feet to a specific location, and then using Bifrost, for example, to react to the terrain and get data about like how far the character is from the ground plane and that. So in its current state, it's you're implementing the behavior or the systems that make the motion that's being generated kind of fit to the constraints. But I think Lance talked a little bit about some of the future looking features that, kind of some of the ideas of what clients have told us about, interactions between characters, and he mentioned a few other things. So today the system is not aware of the environment. It's very much generating keyframes based on those cues.
Yeah, and just to hint a little bit further in that, so Golem, our crowd system that's part of Maya, has a lot of really cool tech about path planning, object avoidance, reacting with the environment and so forth. And you can imagine where these two worlds come together, and we can augment both. So MotionMaker as an animator tool can have some more smarts about the environment using the Golem tech. And conversely, the crowd system could benefit from having MotionMaker as a behavior so that you don't have to feed the crowd system turn left, turn right, fast turn left, slow walk, all of this stuff. You just ask for generative behavior on the fly. And so your crowd's workflow also gets augmented in that way. So there's a convergence of these things is something that we're working on. Of course, love to hear from you if you think that'd be valuable for your workflow.
Nice. So before we close out, I will launch a poll question. This is basically letting us know if you would like someone from Autodesk to learn more about Maya and Maya's MotionMaker. So please let us know. I just launched it right now. But in the meantime, I do want to say a really big thank you to both Lance and JF for their time today. I think it was really, really great, the information they shared, and I'll invite them on to say any final words before we close out before our next session.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for everyone to attend, and love to hear your feedback and try some of the new stuff that's coming out as well.
Yes, thank you. It's a lot of fun. Jump in, try things. It's really a playground. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both.